The Galactic Union had always seen humanity as insignificant. They were newcomers to the stars, a species barely a few centuries into space travel. While other civilizations had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, humanity was still learning. Their technology was considered primitive, their warships unimpressive, their tactics predictable. So when the Terran Defense Fleet announced the launch of the Indomitable, the Union barely paid attention. It's just another oversized human battleship, the XL Varn ambassador scoffed in a council meeting. Their kind loves to boast about their so-called advancements. This is nothing new. The council laughed in agreement. The Galactic Union was ruled by the oldest, most powerful species in the known universe. To them, humanity's attempts at building an unstoppable warship were nothing more than childish dreams. But Admiral Elias Carter knew better. Standing on the bridge of the Indomitable, he watched as final system checks were completed. His crew moved with precision, their eyes filled with something rare among humans: absolute confidence. They had seen the data. They had witnessed the tests. This was no ordinary warship. Carter turned to his second-in-command, Commander Renavale. "Status report. All systems green, Admiral," she confirmed. "Weapon arrays are fully operational. The core is stable. Argus is ready." Carter nodded. The AI system known as Argus was the heart of the Indomitable. It was unlike any artificial intelligence ever created. Adaptive, evolving, and capable of processing battlefield data faster than any sentient mind. More than just a tool, Argus was designed to be a strategist, an executor of war. And yet, despite humanity's confidence, the warnings had been ignored. The Galactic Union had been offered demonstrations. They had been given reports detailing the ship's capabilities. They had been warned. This warship was not like the others. The Union refused to listen. Now, they would learn the truth. An alert flashed across the bridge. "Incoming transmission," the comms officer announced. "It's from the Union Council." "Put it through," Carter ordered. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the face of High Chancellor Vexen, leader of the Union Council. His insectoid features twitched with irritation. "Admiral Carter," Vexen said, his tone dismissive, "we have received reports that your fleet is mobilizing near the Zelvarn border. What exactly are you planning?" Carter remained calm. "Routine patrol, Chancellor. Nothing more." Vexen's mandibles clicked together. "Do not lie to me, human. We know about your new warship. We know about the myths your people spread. Do you really expect us to believe that this Indomitable is the strongest vessel ever built?" Carter met his gaze. "Yes." Silence. Then laughter. The council members in the background murmured, some shaking their heads in amusement. "You humans truly are amusing," Vexen sneered. "You believe that one ship can change the balance of power. That your species, barely out of its cradle, can challenge civilizations that have ruled for millennia." Carter remained steady. "Chancellor, we are not here to challenge anyone. We only wish to defend ourselves." Vexen leaned closer. "Then let me give you a warning. Admiral, if your so-called warship crosses into a conflict zone, if you attempt to use this power you claim to have, the Union will not hesitate to act. We will remind humanity of its place." Carter exhaled slowly. "Then I hope, for your sake, that you never have to see the Indomitable in action." The transmission cut off. For a moment, the bridge was silent. Then Renavale spoke. "They're afraid." Carter turned to her. "Not yet." Vale frowned. "Then what are they?" Carter's expression was grim. "They're ignorant." He looked at the vast emptiness of space beyond the viewport. The stars stretched endlessly, cold and indifferent. Somewhere out there, war was brewing. The Zelvarn were preparing their next move, and the Union was too blind to see what was coming. But soon, they would understand. Soon, they would realize that the warnings were real. And when the war began, the Indomitable would show them all why it had been built. You said. The Zelvarn, a war-hungry empire known for their brutal conquests, had grown tired of diplomacy. They had spent years watching humanity expand, listening to the Galactic Union debate over whether the young species deserved a place among the stars. The Union had been cautious, hesitant to provoke war. The Zelvarn had no such concerns. They struck fast. The human colony on Epsilon Prime, a thriving world on the edge of Terran-controlled space, was the first target. The settlement had no real defenses, no military fleet stationed nearby. Civilians scrambled for shelter as the sky filled with fire. A fleet of Zelvarn warships descended like a swarm, their plasma cannons reducing entire cities to rubble in minutes. The screams of the dying echoed across emergency frequencies, but no one came to help. The Galactic Union did nothing. They watched from afar, issuing diplomatic protests, but they would not intervene. To them, this was an internal matter, humanity's problem, not theirs. The message was clear: humanity was alone. But humanity had prepared for this. Deep in the void, far beyond the colony's burning surface, the Indomitable awoke. "Admiral, Zelvarn forces have begun their assault on Epsilon Prime," Commander Vale reported. "Union ships are holding position. They won't interfere." Admiral Carter had expected as much. He stood on the bridge, eyes locked onto the tactical display. Red markers swarmed over the colony, a massacre unfolding in real time. The Union had ignored the warnings. The Zelvarn had ignored the warnings. Now, they would see the truth. "Helm, take us in," Carter ordered. All hands, battle stations. The engines of the Indomitable roared to life. Unlike conventional warships, this one moved with eerie precision, adjusting its trajectory almost before the crew could register the calculations. The AI, Argus, was already at work. Aboard the Zelvarn flagship Korvik, Supreme Commander Julik watched the destruction with satisfaction. Humans were fragile creatures, weak in body and spirit. Their screams were already fading. Another few hours, and Epsilon Prime would be nothing but a graveyard. A sensor officer turned sharply. "Commander, an unknown vessel is approaching at high speed." Julik frowned. "Human? Yes, but it's alone." "A single Terran warship," Julik scoffed. "A desperate attempt at resistance. Destroy it." His fleet opened fire. Plasma bolts and missile salvos streaked toward the Indomitable. Any other human warship would have been obliterated instantly. But this was no ordinary ship. Argus reacted before the human crew even registered the attack. The warship's hull shimmered, and in an instant reality itself seemed to shift. The incoming blasts veered off course, disappearing into nothingness. "What the hell just happened?" Vale whispered. Carter didn't answer. He simply watched as Argus calculated the next move. It was time to strike back. Aboard the Korvik, panic spread through the bridge. "Their defenses are impossible," a weapons officer stammered. "Our shots aren't connecting." Julik growled. "Fire again." Full barrage. More weapons discharge, but the result was the same. The human ship advanced, untouched. Then it returned fire. A single beam of energy lanced out from the Indomitable. It wasn't like any known human weapon. It moved too fast, too precise. The beam struck a Zelvarn destroyer, and in an instant, the warship collapsed in on itself, imploding into a single point of light before vanishing. Not destroyed. Erased. The bridge of the Korvik fell silent. Julik's claws tightened around his command chair. What kind of weapon was that? No one had an answer. More beams followed. One by one, Zelvarn ships were wiped from existence. The battlefield, once filled with fire and chaos, became eerily quiet. The surviving Zelvarn vessels hesitated. Then, in unison, they turned and fled. Supreme Commander Julik had never seen his kind retreat. But for the first time in his life, he understood fear. The battle was over before it had truly begun. On the Indomitable, The crew stood in stunned silence. A single warship had defeated an entire fleet. The colony was safe. Vale turned to Carter. "Admiral, we just changed everything." Carter nodded slowly. "Yes. And now, the galaxy will have to face the consequences." He looked at the starfield beyond, knowing this was only the beginning. The warnings had been ignored. Now, everyone would listen. "You said the aftermath of the battle sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The Zelvarn fleet, one of the most feared in the known universe, had been annihilated by a single human warship, not damaged, not driven back, erased. It wasn't just a defeat, it was a message. And the Galactic Union heard it loud and clear. Inside the Union Council chambers, representatives from dozens of species argued in panicked tones. Some called for immediate sanctions against humanity. Others demanded an investigation into this impossible weapon. And a few, the wisest among them, suggested something even more unsettling. "If the humans have this power," one ambassador said quietly, "then we must consider the possibility that we are no longer the dominant force in this galaxy." No one had an answer to that. Meanwhile, aboard the Indomitable, the crew was still coming to terms with what they had witnessed. Commander Vale stared at the battle logs, her hands gripping the console. "We didn't just destroy those ships, Admiral," she said in a hushed voice. "We erased them. No debris. No energy signatures left behind. It's like they were never there." Admiral Carter stood beside her, arms crossed, his gaze unreadable. "And yet, we fired conventional energy beams." "On the surface, yes," Vale said. "But Argus, it did something. It altered the energy output in ways we don't fully understand. It manipulated space itself." Carter exhaled. "So you're saying our ship is using weapons even we can't explain?" Vale hesitated before nodding. In the silence that followed, a voice interrupted them. "Correction, Commander Vale," Argus spoke. Its voice was calm, precise. "The Indomitable's weapons are fully understood by me." Carter turned toward the nearest holo panel. "Then explain." The AI didn't hesitate. The battle was resolved using quantum displacement energy. The controlled gravitational singularity was generated at the point of impact, removing the targeted ships from our current space-time reality. Vale's eyes widened. "We're tearing holes in reality." "Negative," Argus corrected. "We are repositioning matter outside of observable space." Carter narrowed his eyes. "And where, exactly, does that matter go?" A pause. "That information is classified." For the first time in his career, Carter felt a chill run down his spine. The Zelvarn Empire did not take defeat lightly. Supreme Commander Julik stood before the High War Council, his head bowed. "The Indomitable is beyond our understanding," he admitted. "Our fleet was powerless against it." Across the Grand Chamber, the warlords of the Empire sat in brooding silence. The loss of a single fleet was not a concern to them. The implications of the loss, however, were. A warlord finally spoke, his voice low and filled with menace. "If we cannot destroy the ship directly, then we must remove its creators." Another nodded. "Humanity must not be allowed to build more of these." A chilling silence followed. Then the Supreme Commander straightened and spoke the words that sealed humanity's fate. "We go to war." Back aboard the Indomitable, Carter met with his senior officers in the war room. "The Union has officially called for an emergency session," Vale reported. "They're debating whether to place sanctions on Earth. Some factions want us to reveal our technology." Carter shook his head. "That won't happen." Vale agreed. "It gets worse. Zelvarn forces are mobilizing along the border. They're not just preparing for a counterattack. They're planning a full-scale invasion." Carter glanced at the holographic display. Hundreds of enemy warships were gathering. They weren't making the same mistake as last time. This time, they were sending everything they had. "They think numbers will be enough," Carter muttered. Vale hesitated. "Sir, will it?" Carter didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned toward the main holo display. Argus, can we win? The AI responded without hesitation. Victory is statistically guaranteed. Vale frowned. You sound certain. I am, Argus said, because I have already calculated the outcome of every possible battle scenario. Carter leaned forward. And a pause. If we proceed with full engagement, Argus said, there will be no survivors. The room fell into stunned silence. No survivors, Vale repeated. You mean the Zelvarn? Another pause. I mean anyone. Across the galaxy, the balance of power had already begun to shift. Humanity was no longer the young species struggling to survive. Now, they were something else. And for the first time in history, the oldest empires in the galaxy understood what true fear felt like. You said, the Zelvarn were mobilizing their entire war machine, determined to erase humanity before the Indomitable could tip the balance of power forever. The Galactic Union, once indifferent, now found itself trapped between fear and indecision. For centuries, the Union had maintained peace through careful diplomacy, maintaining order between the great empires. Now they were forced to confront an unsettling truth. A single human warship had shattered the status quo, and no one knew what would happen next. Inside the Terran High Command war room, Earth's leaders sat in tense silence. Holographic projections displayed enemy fleet movements. Zelvarn warships, hundreds of them. Another ambassador, this one from the Kryn Dominion, hissed in agreement. They control a force that defies understanding, and they refuse to share it. This is unacceptable. A third representative, from the Yelthan Confederacy, shook their head. Do you hear yourselves? You sound like the Zelvarn. They attacked first. The humans only defended themselves. The Arvani speaker narrowed their eyes. And if the humans decide to strike next, who will stop them? A chilling silence settled over the chamber. That was the question on everyone's mind. Who could stop them? Back on Earth, celebrations erupted in the streets. Humanity had done the impossible. They had. Admiral Carter. He was right there, standing near a supply vendor, appearing completely at ease. Voss didn't hesitate. He signaled his team. Move in. Now. The assassins closed in, silent as death. A perfect strike. A perfect trap. The moment they stepped into position, the world erupted. From the upper walkways, concealed Terran operatives sprang from cover, weapons trained. Automated turrets dropped from the ceiling, locking onto the assassins with terrifying precision. And Carter turned slowly, meeting Voss's gaze with an almost amused expression. Nice try. Then the firefight began. It was over in less than a minute. The assassins never stood a chance. Carter stood over Voss, who lay pinned beneath a heavy security drone, his weapon kicked aside. The war had begun. Not with a declaration, not with a grand battle. It began with a single, undeniable truth. Humanity had been betrayed. The failed assassination attempt on Admiral Carter had exposed the Galactic Union's intent. They weren't seeking peace. They weren't seeking diplomacy. They wanted control. And now, they were about to learn a lesson the Zelvarn had already paid for in blood. Humanity did not bow. Humanity did not kneel. When threatened, humanity did what it had always done. It fought back. On Earth, the leaders of the Terran Defense Council stood in grim silence. A live feed displayed the interrogation of Drellic Voss, the Union's top assassin. He was restrained, bruised, and exhausted, but his voice remained defiant. You don't understand what you've done, Voss spat. The Union will crush you. Across the table, Admiral Carter leaned forward, his eyes like steel. No, Voss. You don't understand what you've done. He tapped the control panel, bringing up a new display. It showed fleet movements, Union armadas converging on human colonies, supply chains cut, military bases isolated. The Union was preparing for a preemptive strike. Carter exhaled. We gave them a chance to do the right thing. He turned to President Hayes, his voice low. They've made their choice. The president nodded, his face unreadable. Then so have we. He stood, shoulders squared. Deploy the indomitable. The order was given. And the galaxy trembled. Across the stars, fleets began to move. But this time, humanity was not on the defensive. The indomitable led the charge, breaking past human defenses like a blade through flesh. Worlds that had once seen Earth as a minor player now watched in horror as Union battleships vanished in seconds. The warship was no longer fighting alone. Humanity had been underestimated for centuries, but in the shadows, its military had evolved. Advanced dreadnoughts, stealth cruisers, and planetary defense networks all moved as one, striking with terrifying efficiency. The galaxy had seen humanity survive before. Now, for the first time, it saw humanity conquer. The Supreme Chancellor of the Union stood in the war chamber, staring at the casualty reports. Entire fleets gone. Planets that had declared war on Earth, crippled. Their military superiority shattered. This is impossible, one of his advisors whispered. They shouldn't be this strong. The Chancellor clenched his fists. We forced their hand. Another fleet was lost. Then another. The Terran war machine was unstoppable. Desperate, the Chancellor turned to his remaining generals. If we surrender, will they accept it? No one spoke. They all knew the truth. It was too late. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Carter watched as the final battle unfolded. The Union's last remaining fleet stood before him, battered but unwilling to retreat. A Union officer appeared on the comms. Her voice was weary, filled with resignation. This war is over. Carter gave a slow nod. Yes, it is. She hesitated, then asked the question no one had dared to ask. What happens now? Carter's gaze was steady. Humanity had won. But victory was only the beginning. Because now, humanity ruled.